Alright, so let me give you, we have four conic sections. We have parabolas, we have circles, we have ellipses. Circles are just ellipses, but we will treat them just slightly different because we are asking for the radius. And hyperbolas. So I'm going to give you equations, and you're going to need to figure out whether you have a parabola, a circle, an ellipse, or a hyperbola. For example, (3y squared minus x minus 6y plus 5 equals 0. So for this, you're going to need to figure out which kind of conic section this is. And when you figure out which kind of conic section it is, you need to make a sketch of the graph. And identify some crucial points. Anybody know right now what conic section it is? Not a circle. Parabola. This one's a parabola. How do you know? Just a guess? Yeah, you know by the equation. Why do you think it's a parabola? Yeah, this gets to be an x equals y squared. Only one of the variables has a squared term to it. The other one is linear. So this turns out to be a parabola. So we're going to work it through. We're going to work all these through the same way. Step number 1. We're going to move the constant to the right side, all by itself. So I'll subtract 5 and get 3y squared minus x minus 6y equals negative 5. Oops, that's step number 1. Sorry. Step number 2. I'm going to organize the x and y terms. I'm going to put the x squared with the x's, the y squareds with the y's. So I'm going to change this to 3y squared minus 6y minus x equals negative 5. Step number 3. Oh, it makes a difference for where I go to now. You know, everything I'm doing is trying to get me to this point where I got to do completing the square. Step number 3, if I have a coefficient on my squared term, I need to factor it out. So I've got a coefficient of 3 for the y squared. So I factor out that 3. So this is 3 times y squared, and I also factor it out of the y term. So this is 3 times y squared minus 2y. I only do it for the same variable, and I don't factor out any variables. I just factor out the coefficient. Minus x equals negative 5. And then I complete the square. All right, so I complete the square for any time I've got a squared term and a linear term together with the same variable. Okay, so y squared minus 2y is y minus half of 2 squared. Believe me? Okay. I took the y squared, I turned it into a y. I took the negative 2y and divided that by 2 and y and get negative 1. Negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. I always divide by 2. And that y squared term I turn into y. Well, let me just tell you that y minus 1 squared is y squared. Minus y plus 1, it's y squared minus 2y plus 1. Oh, I've got my y squared, and I've got my minus 2y, but I don't have my 1. This is completing the square. So I'm completing the square, and we've done completing the square before. The y minus 1 term comes from taking y squared and square rooting that. Taking negative 2y and dividing the negative 2 by 2. And taking the y away. We're going to take the y's away from both. Take one y away from both. And I get y minus 1 squared. But, let me finish my sentence. Y minus 1 squared is y squared plus 2y plus negative 1 squared, which is 1. Yes, Rebecca. Yeah, you always divide it by 2. And then yeah. I'm going to do it 4 times today. So, okay. Now, y minus 1 squared is y squared minus 2y plus 1. Multiply that by that 3. Don't lose the 3. And I get 3 times 1 is 3. I've had to add that to the left side of my equation. Add that to the right side. Okay. This isn't all the hard part. We're going to do this 4 times, so you'll kind of get it. You'll see it done a few times. Okay. Now, I see a parabola because y minus 1 squared is y squared minus 2y plus 1. So when I changed y squared minus 2y to a perfect square, I needed to add 1 back in because I gotta keep this y squared minus 2y. I want it to be equal to y minus 1 squared. I want it to be equal to a perfect square. But to do that, I gotta add 1 squared back in. I gotta add that second term squared back in. Now, I also had a 3 sitting out here, so I had to multiply by that 3, and now all things are equal. My 2 equations, the top one and the bottom one, have not changed value. Okay? And whatever I do on the left side, I do on the right. All right, I'm going to write this in the form of x equals, because I've got a parabola. So let me add x to both sides. And I get x equals 3 times y minus 1 squared. Oh, I don't want this negative 2 over here, so let me add 2 to both sides. And now I know what my equation is. I know exactly what my equation is. This is a parabola. And my h, for a parabola that's an x equals, my h is the 2. My k is the opposite of that minus 1, is positive 1. So I've got a parabola with a vertex at 2, 1. And so it's going to look like this.